Hi, my name is Reed Silverne, and the name of the show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. And what you just heard is my new theme song. And the question is, how did I get a theme song since I've always prided myself on minimalist talk TV? Well, the fact of the matter was that I went down to California and my nephew was there and he showed me his magnificent synthesizer and we started playing with it and he knew I had a TV show, so we decided to have him write me a theme song, and that is the theme song. It sounds like a cross between the theme song to Dynasty and the Electric Parade over at Disneyland, but I just love it. And now that I've gone through this routine, I'm so proud of it, I'm going to play it again. Although I might talk over some of it. So this is basically my theme song now, and he wrote me a couple other ones. He wrote it in about 15 minutes. Kid is a genius. So I'm going to stop for a second. And of course, that's coming over the computer. Today, I don't have the internet picture because I chose to put it on the Elmo. You might wonder, what is an Elmo? An Elmo is a little thing that they fix one color, and hopefully that's not the color of your shirt, because if it is, you disappear. And they take some image, in this case it's an image on a little machine and a camera in the control room, and that replaces the blue screen behind me. So if I didn't have the chroma key on, all you'd see is a blue screen, literally is a blue curtain. So lately I've been running the computer through the blue screen, and you've been getting either a Zillow, which is a satellite picture, but unfortunately Zillow is only good, and you can only get satellite images in the United States with it. And if you turn it on, it'll give you little summaries and algorithms how much your home is worth. So that's kind of a neat thing too. I'm trying to get Google Earth. Once I have Google Earth, I'm sure that you've been watching the news. If you haven't, watch the news. And every now and then a big giant spinning globe of the Earth will come in, and they'll spin it to a certain place, and then it'll focus in and in and in and in and in until you see a city and a coastline, and then you can actually focus all the way in. You can see individual buildings, and as I showed you on Zillow a couple shows ago, you can even see cars in the parking lot. Now, of course, the government is much better ones than that, but these are the ones that are open to the public. And if you want real time, that's another story, because the satellite has to be over the point in the Earth that it's taken the picture. So on Zillow or Google Earth, usually you get a picture, a composite picture of different places in the world. It was probably done 3 to 6 months ago. However, it's pretty good. I was doing the Middle East crisis on Google Earth today, and I was hoping to be able to get it on the computer over here, maybe next week. You never know. If the Israel-Lebanon crisis isn't still going on, we can always do what's going on in Iraq. And it's just kind of a neat thing, and everything I do here, I do with, well, there is support, and I have to give credit to the Access Tucson people. They set up the shot, but I control the titles in the black and the computer over there. And of course, this time I set up the blue screen there, but if I had the internet through the blue screen, I could change the internet as well. And once we get Google Earth, I'll be able to play with it. Of course, when you go on TV, it's very, very professional, and they pre-do the little routine that you see so they don't screw it up live for the public. And I'll be able to focus in on a specific spot uh, in the war zone, although it's not a real-time picture. You won't see missiles going off or anything like that, but you'll see buildings that were probably there 3 to 6 months ago. And consequently, although things do change, and in the case of the Middle East, things do get blown up, most of those buildings are probably still there. So what's going on? Today is Friday, and because it's Friday, everything I talk about this Middle East crisis is going to be out of date, even by the time you see the first showing, which will be Sunday. And since every now and then I might be on travel, and who knows what else, might get rerun in 6 months, this is going to be news that is so stale, who's going to care? And every now and then, I'll do a show about the first Gulf War, just because it's an historical event, just like it's really happening over here. And it just seems like, well, he's doing a rerun. We're watching a rerun of something that happened in 1991. So there you are. What's been going on? I'm going to, because I'm more concerned today, to be very honest with you, with my beautiful theme song than with setting up my show. I don't have my little article out there all pre-done. It appears to be back. Oh boy, really messed up today. So anyway, I pretty much know what's going on just off the top of my head. First of all, this is a war between Israel and Lebanon, or at least the territory of Lebanon. And behind me, we have a map. I'm going to have to get used to using my other hand, of northern Israel, which is right here, and southern Lebanon. I'm learning to do what the weathermen do, because they look at a screen. In fact, the screen is in front of me, and they have to put their hand the opposite direction that's obvious to them to where things are. Weathermen obviously spend minutes and minutes of training in order to get that down. And this is just beginning for me. But a week and a half ago, Hezbollah, which is a Shiite Lebanese resistance group, which means terrorist group, crossed the border of Israel and decided that they would take out an Israeli post. They killed 8 Israeli soldiers while they weren't expecting it. And the other 2 were kidnapped or taken prisoner, whichever way you want to call it, and are now prisoners of the Hezbollah group. Have they done that before? Yes, they have. They did that in 2001, and Israel really didn't do anything. They sat in as prisoners for 4 years. In fact, those particular guys, there were 3 of them, they were killed. And then another guy was lured over to Lebanon. Some people call him a drug dealer, some people call him a shady businessman, and he was taken prisoner. And there was a prisoner exchange, this was last year in 2005, where Israel gave up hundreds and hundreds of prisoners, something like 1,200 prisoners, in return for 1 live person, 3 dead bodies, information about another guy who had been killed in the original Israel-Lebanon war back in 1982 through 1984. So what does that matter over here? Well, it matters a lot because Israel has taken these little bitty pinpricks, and it is a pinprick. Israel is a country of 7 million people. The Jews are 5.6 million Jews over there. The rest are Druzim, which is a certain Islamic kind of sect, I guess you might say, and Palestinians and Bedouin Arabs. But they're 7 million strong. They have one of the strongest militaries in the world. They claim to have the 5th strongest military. I don't know whether that's true or not, but they certainly have a very large air force. They have a capable navy, and they have an army which has been basically the fear of the Middle East for many, many years. They say, of course, America has the strongest army in the world. China, Russia, India. Superpowers are more powerful because they can basically not only have pretty good weapons, but they can also bring to bear hundreds and hundreds of thousands and even millions in the case of China of soldiers and military assets. Israel has an army or a military of about 300,000. They have another 300,000 to 500,000 in reserve, and if they're just threatened with extermination, they could probably bring up 1 to 1.5 million fighters. If it's just outright total annihilation, win or die war. And of course, that's not what this is, but it was just a last straw for the Israelis, and certainly a last straw for the Prime Minister of Israel, whose name is Ehud Olmert. Ehud Olmert is the successor to Sharon. Sharon was the head of what used to be called the Likud Party. He was prime minister for many, many years. The Likud Party fell apart when Sharon decided that if Israel and keeps everything between the Jordan River and the sea, which includes what eventually is going to be Palestine and Israel and the Gaza Strip, that sooner or later there are going to be more Arabs than Jews over there. Right now, I think it's about 55-45. And eventually, the Arabs are going to say, why do we need a two-state solution? Well, if a one-state solution, you can oppress us for a few years, but eventually they'll impose democracy, we'll vote you out of existence, and then once we're in charge of the government, we'll take over your magnificent army and we'll exterminate you. So that seemed like a bad deal for the Israelis. A lot of Israelis believe in settling every inch of the land. And a lot of Israelis don't. And Sharon proved to be one that went from the we're going to put settlers on every inch of the land to this is really dumb because eventually we're going to be outnumbered. So the Israelis withdrew all of the settlers and all of the soldiers from the entire Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip is way in the south of Israel. I don't have it on the map behind me. And it's along the sea. It attaches to Egypt. And even though it's very, very small, it's maybe less than 50 square miles, it has 1.4 million people. As many people as in all of the Manhattan Island in New York. Or probably more people than Cleveland or Detroit. So it's a very, very densely populated area, extremely poor, full of people that hate Israelis, a lot of radicals, a lot of Hamasniks, and so on and so forth. So the Israelis felt, well, you know, if we get rid of Gaza, then even if, you know, somehow or other that we are forced to have just one mass state between the Jordan River and the sea, we will have 2/3 of the population, not 55%, and we probably aren't going to be outvoted for decades and decades and decades. So that's basically what they did. They pulled all of the settlers and all of the troops out of Gaza, and in return, you'd think that they'd be anxious to do something, not so much for Israel, but to encourage Israel to keep on doing the same thing. And just very, very temporarily, there was a consensus among the Israeli population that it wasn't a good idea to occupy everything and to put settlers everywhere. It was a good idea to separate the Israelis from the Palestinians. And that did occur. So there was an election in Israel, and the Likud party fell apart, and Sharon, who was this very popular prime minister who pulled the Israelis out of Gaza, and who had previously been an incredible general, won a bunch of wars and so on and so forth. And they said, well, we're going to try to do the same thing over parts of the West Bank so that they won't be counted either. They would be part of a disarmed Palestinian state, and all they have to do is play ball with us. So there was an election in Israel, and during the election period, while the campaign was going on, the Prime Minister of Israel, Ariel Sharon, had a horrible stroke, And to this day, he is still in a coma in a hospital. And he was taken over by his deputy prime minister, a guy whose name is Ehud Olmert, and was pretty much considered to be a very weak character throughout the Middle East. And that's what's got us to this fix today, because the Palestinians had their own election. And they elected Hamas, whose charter is to destroy Israel root and branch and expel all the Jews from the Middle East and to create an Islamic state where Jews and Christians have no rights and Islamic law is the law of the land. So even though during their campaign they said, well, you know, this religious stuff is not as important as they get rid of all the Israelis part. So and even before this happened, they had these really, I have to admit, low-tech, really almost worthless rockets called Qassams, and they started shooting missiles at Israel. And whenever they could get through, because Israel's building a big giant wall between the Palestinians and the Israelis, as they say, over the Green Line on the Palestinian land, or at least land that the Palestinians would like to be part of their country. Well, they probably, if anybody does actually negotiate together, and nobody's doing it right now, there'll probably be some exchanges of territory. So most of this territory probably would end up with Israel. However, they sent in some suicide bombers, but as Israel kept on building this barrier, it got harder and harder to send suicide bombers. So the Palestinians actually built a tunnel underneath the wall around the Gaza Strip, and they ran underneath this tunnel, and then they took an Israeli prisoner. They killed two, took an Israeli prisoner and brought him back to Gaza. That was about 2.5 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks. The Israelis reacted far differently than they have in the past. In the past, well, they would send a little drone over, and there would be some leader of some Palestinian faction. They'd blow him up. This time they went in with guns blazing, started killing everybody, and it was quite a thing. Israel got a lot of bad press. But for the most part, most people in the world couldn't care less. Now for the second event. This was, I believe, July 9th, but it could have been July 7th, but it was about a week and a half ago. The Hezbollah, now who are the Hezbollah? The Hezbollah are a Shiite guerrilla group that fought the Israelis. The Israelis had gone into Lebanon in 1978, and they invaded all the way up to Beirut, central Lebanon. In fact, I'm going to show it above the top of the map there in 1982, and then it gradually withdrawn, got to get my things, over here to this area right along the border. And let's see what direction is up. Right around here. So that area over there was Israeli controlled, and Hezbollah, whose ally is Iran, which is a Shiite state, a Shiite country, got a lot of training and arms and so on and so forth, and they're the folks that started roadside bombs. And they roadside bombing Israelis, gave them a hard time. They were just constant, not very, very high casualties, but constant casualties, and it just became not worth it. And a real peacenik became prime minister of Israel. His name was Barak, and he's the guy that was at the second Camp David agreement that fell apart with Arafat in 2000. So earlier that year, Mr. Barak actually pulled out of southern Lebanon. There, I'm getting better at it. And instead of to a line called the Blue Line that was set by the UN. So the UN went in there. He basically said, we will withdraw out of Lebanon every single inch of it to any place that the UN says is the border. So the UN set the border, and the Lebanese army was supposed to come in and replace them, but instead this guerrilla group, which already had a lot of citizens, a lot of Shiite citizens in that area, took over. And immediately the Iranians started shipping in missiles. And right now there's supposed to be 13 15,000 missiles that can attack Israel. And right now, during this little mini conflict that's going on now, the Hezbollahs have dropped about 1,000 of those missiles on Israel. Now, there are a couple other little wrinkles to this whole thing. So the Hezbollahs also built a tunnel, went under the border fence, and surprised an Israeli outpost, killed 8 Israeli soldiers, captured 2, and just figured, oh, you know, it'll be just like last year. We had 1 hostage, and that wasn't military, and 3 bodies, and we exchanged that for 1,200 prisoners. We'll do the same thing again. The Israelis will look very, very weak, and we'll be the heroes of the Arab world. Well, he just happened to hit a weak prime minister who needed to appear strong because he was losing his consensus. And that's the problem. The Kadima party in Olmert within Israeli politics is losing his consensus because Olmert wants to pull out of parts of the West Bank. And of course, if the missiles fly, I noticed that the chroma color is being adjusted back there. If the missiles fly, then it will actually attack the heart of Israel, all the big cities, which are right on the border with the West Bank. So that, of course, would be a disaster, and that would make Israel a lot weaker and a lot more vulnerable than it is now. Now, how vulnerable is Israel going to be? Not too vulnerable, because they happen to have 200 to 400 nuclear bombs. They have cruise missiles, they have submarines. If any real opponent came in there with a giant army, started killing all the Israelis or genociding them, they could incinerate any country in the Middle East. And with 400 bombs, possibly any country in the world. So the only problem is that all the nuclear bombs in the world don't do you any good, because you're not going to sling around nuclear bombs just because somebody is kidnapping your soldiers, something like that. Well, to the surprise of Hezbollah, to the surprise of the entire world, the Israelis just started bombing the bits, and I cannot use any bad language, but you can imagine what to bits means out of Lebanon. They destroyed the Lebanese Beirut airport. North of this picture is Beirut, which is the capital of Lebanon, city of about 2 million. Lebanon only has 3 million people, so you can imagine how few people there are in the rest of the country. Tremendous tourist mecca, lots of finance outfits and so on and so forth in Lebanon. And Lebanon was really pulling its act together, especially for tourism. And there were about, I'd say, 30, 40,000 Westerners, Englishmen, Frenchmen, Germans, you name it, and 25,000 Americans. But 25,000 Americans is a little misleading, because many of these Americans are dual citizens who are really Lebanese, live in Lebanon full-time as Lebanese, and hold American passports. So there's about 8,000 Americans that are real tourists or students or just Americans who just happen to work there that needed evacuation. So the evacuation has been going on. The southern suburb of Beirut been bombed to bits because that is Hezbollah headquarters. There's a Shiite neighborhood in the southern part of Beirut with about, 500,000 people, and that's where the head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, lives, and that is a big deal over there. Now, I don't know if anybody's in the control room, but I don't have my my time monitor, so I don't really know whether I'm going on or over the 30 minutes. Wrap it up. Okay, that is my show, and I am going to turn on my music again and close this down. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully next week we can get Google Earth over here, and I'm going to fade out with my theme song in the background. Thank you very much. This is Fed Pride, and